Okay, welcome back, everybody. Now that we have discussed complexity, let's talk about content. So in the functional module content areas, we have 5 separate domains. They include leisure, performance, personal care, home, and social. And so you can see that with these 5 content areas, we're going to have a range of complexity. And I'll show you how this wraps together in a minute. Here's some real brief comments on what these different areas contain. And then I'll give you some operational definitions of them in a minute. But personal care is kind of taking care of those basic biological and safety needs. Home is going to be in regards to targets that are being at home, taking care of your space within a home, whether you're a child and it's your room, or you're independent or semi or independently living, and the complexity of what that means. I'm not certain I have all those skills myself yet, as well as the social domain, being a member of the social community, and not necessarily to force everybody to be a social butterfly, but rather to find that niche of social interaction and depth that they want to have. Some people might be great with just one friend, but it's a great one. It's a fantastic friend and you do everything together, and others might have the need for 10 friends and constantly interacting in a social world. So again, to kind of feel out what those needs are, and move towards the goals that are appropriate for that individual person. Let's see, leisure definition of downtime and connecting with values, and then performance skills from work to your own personal aspirations. When you take these various domains and then the levels of complexity, we have this grid that forms where each item that makes up one contribution to the totality of 250 skills in the curriculum and assessment can be categorized into one of these areas. When deciding where did our laundry list of skills go in terms of these content areas, we asked 10, 15 DCBAs and higher level graduate students to sort these things, to sort them into the various levels of complexity. And then, I try to fit the domains within those levels. And so what we see here is this distribution of the whole 250 skills. At that essential level, those most basic levels, we see a variety of treatment options to enhance that. And as you move up, you start to see some of these variations in the number of items go up or down. So, this is the way that the data shook out, and thus that's the way that these items have been characterized within the curriculum. So let me unpack maybe some more kind of extensive operational definitions of what fits into each of these domain areas. So personal care involves attending to one's upkeep and enhancement. And again, they're going to start with basic essential things like using the bathroom, taking a shower, to more, not optional, but more life encompassing tasks such as styling your hair the way you like, and, traveling or packing suitcases and figuring out what you need in there that's important to take for your own personal care. I mean, sometimes for me, it's just packing involves like a toothbrush and a bottle of bourbon, and that's it. And then applying basic safety skills or first aid safety and reactionary skills when something goes wrong with you. So taking care of yourself in a variety of different ways. Those home skills are tasks relevant for life within the home, such as opening, closing windows, vacuuming, dusting, sorting recyclables, prepping food, doing the dishes, managing your own finances, following recipes, decorating cakes and flowers, and just not decorating a flower, but it just all those subtle things of life that are often forgotten about as we're constantly focusing on these more basic areas. Then engagement within the social community may range from basic, kind of introductory interverbals to asking WH questions then and understanding the answers, maintaining back and forth dialogue, asking others to hang out, to compliment other people, as well as how to use social media platforms in the ways that kids these days are doing. When it comes to those leisure type tasks, they may include drawings, the stuff that some people might find fun. Drawing, sketching, using different apps for recreational purposes, playing games with others, interacting with pets, taking care of pets, making reservations at restaurants, planning fun things with others. So that would be your leisure skills. And then finally, the performance skills are ones in which we enhance movement of our own body. They may be things such basic as crawling, walking, jumping, using a ladder, to things like putting an espresso maker together. I don't know if that one made it on there, but having the repertoire at least intact such that we can now, when given the directions for that new IKEA couch that needs to be put together, that we can put it together. So from the very basic essential skills up to those that are more liberating, life enhancing. So with this kind of grid of complexity and of content now in place, the next thing that we need to be concerned about is, when is a skill really learned? And when is the totality actualized? And we could say that this thing is mastered and it's time to move on. So in these peak books that many of you guys have had, there has been an emphasis from day one that, contingency learning alone is not sufficient. And that none of us with a verbal repertoire learn exclusively by the control of programmed contingencies, but rather there's constant verbal interaction that's going on that is contributing to the acquisition or the failure of acquisition of certain skills when exposed to those program contingencies. The last two modules of PEAK, the equivalence and transformation module, were designed to improve what would be called, relational flexibility or flexibility of skills, the deriving, the novel generation of responding in the absence of any programmed reinforcers. When we look at what happens when you take that stuff out of PEAK, well, the research, from us has shown that you don't get as much bang for your buck. More technically, you don't get as much improvement. And you don't have the same levels of global change in things like intelligence or IQ. we've seen many studies over the years show the relationship between deriving and things such as challenging behavior, autism symptomology, intelligence, adaptive behavior. And so it seems as if that thing called flexibility or deriving should not necessarily be considered a luxurious add-on, but rather needs to be at the core of what we do. And so this idea of relational responding seems to have to fit into the way that we teach life skills, because if all we're doing is prompting and chaining and backwards chaining and hand over handing a certain step, if that's all I give you, I've done nothing more than regurgitate what's already there. And to me, if all of this added benefit was coming from equivalence and transformation when it came to teaching those skills in peak, it seemed to be the case that as you build life skills, it was going to necessitate making sure that there was elements of relations and relational responding in every skill that we built. And so therefore, I can't just say, teach somebody to brush their teeth, or worse yet, just have an assessment that says, can they do it or not? And if not, well, teach it, I guess. It needed to be more directive than that. It needed to ensure that toothbrushing and every other skill had some depth to it. And so what does this mean? Well, it took me on a journey to explore the integration of relational responding in the acquisition, the maintenance, and the expansion of life skills. Let's take, for example, a task analysis, such as hand washing. This is the one I generated, but we could change it, I'm sure. But, we'd have maybe step 1, turn on the water. Step 2, get your hands wet. Step 3, use some soap and lather your hands and so on. Seems like it would be fine. I mean, I'm a behavior analyst. I came up with this. It sounds kind of like what you do when you wash your hands. Yeah, but there's some variations here. Maybe you don't need to turn on the water. It's one of those fancy automatic sinks. And maybe you air dry your hands rather than towel dry your hands, or maybe there's paper towels, and oh no, wait, there's nothing in the bathroom. I gotta just wipe them off on my pants or my shirt. And so this thing that looks initially sufficient starts to weaken its utility as we begin to explore the complexities of what surrounds this task, meaning the world. And if we teach this thing to a T, we can get it, I'm sure. I mean, I remember in graduate school watching these videos of these rats that, the old, founders of our field that taught to, run through this little house, and it would press a piano key and would trigger an elevator, and the rat would get in this little rat-sized elevator. I think this whole thing was like a Barbie house that somebody reworked to be a rat exploratorium. And then it would go down a slide, and it would go through another part of the house and open a door, and you think, damn, that rat's pretty talented. Well, once you see how they taught it, using chaining procedures, it's I guess the magic of it starts to fade away, and you realize that, hell, I could have probably done that too. And when that approach is taken, whereby we just prompt and reinforce, and each link of the chain serves as the discriminative stimulus for the next response. That's great until the chain is weakened in one way or another by a new faucet, no towel, damn water doesn't turn off. And this thing, which is supposed to be a life skill, looks like a veneer of a life skill. And it's not ready for the robustness of hand washing as you go through your life. And so something like this can be added or expanded. We can generalize, we can train loosely, we can use different faucets. Maybe we'll use a new bar of soap. Oh, damn it. What if there's liquid soap? What if it's one of those automatic pump soap things? And something as simplistic as washing your hands could occupy months of programming for all the scenarios by which it might be occasioned under. Even the term like use soap, which seemed like a nice, maybe sufficient step, like use the soap, you should, just get it and rub your hands. Well, no, now they're telling us we're supposed to sing a song, happy birthday, and that's like 30 seconds, or maybe it's supposed to be a minute. I don't even remember if I sing it fast or slow. Okay, so now I got to sing a song while I'm washing my damn hands. And all of a sudden I got to pick up I got to put the soap. Where do I put the soap back? And I just drop the damn soap. And so all of a sudden the task link, which seems sufficient, is not necessarily that sufficient anymore. How long do you rinse your hands for? And what if there's little bubbles on there? But I stick them under the water. And any of you that have worked on something like this with your clients, you have seen maybe this thing go on, but their hands aren't clean. You know that there's still damn soap on one of their hands. You know that they have to use this faucet. And that to me is not good. And it gets worse than this, because as I describe this task to you, I purposely did it without a graphic. You can kind of see this task, can't you? You can kind of hear it. Maybe some of you during the break washed your hands yourself and you're like, damn, I bet I didn't sing happy birthday all that way. And no, we're almost out of soap. And this thing that is so surface level in terms of discriminative stimuli and responses in a linked task start to take on, at least for us, there's a hell of a lot more psychologically that's going on here. And turn on the water. That water's always cold, and we gotta get a new water heater. What the hell? Damn husband needs to buy this water heater and is out there drinking with his friends instead of getting this thing fixed. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on with you than just that water. So it's the occasion for you to stick your damn hands in it. And so more complexity can be added here. Why the hell are you washing your hands? I don't know. You told me to. No, because they're dirty. What's wrong with dirty hands? You get sick. What's wrong with being sick? I don't feel good. I want to avoid being sick because I like feeling good all the time. But and we can go farther. What the hell is soap? Is it just this little square box thing, this rectangle sitting next to the sink? Or is there more complexity to it than that? What's your favorite kind of soap? What's the soap you like the least? What about that like gritty soap stuff that you used to scrub your hands with when you've been working in a garage on your car? And you are like, what the hell are you talking about? So soap is different to me than you. Or if I play with this a little bit and say, if soap was Vax and not Puck, what should you use? Or what should you ask for if there's no soap available? Should you ask for a Vax or a Puck? Okay. The hell's going on here? And you guys could solve this puzzle. You even know what your hand is. They say dry your hands. You even know where it is, what it is. And so the degree to which this stuff starts being added on to the task itself matters. Your ability to answer these questions matter? Now go find your soap hand, your hand washing successful client and ask him this question. Ask him this question and this one and see where you get. And does that thing matter? I don't know. At one level, they can wash your hands. That's great. But if you're not concurrently using these skills and building an opportunity to understand what you're doing, you are kind of constantly be needing maintenance over and over and over again. And I don't know about you. I don't know how many things I can memorize in my life. At some point, I got to go from memorizing and understanding. I have to know the need for doing this is not just the occasions by which it's supposed to occur. Oh, I got dirt on my hands. When I go to the sink and do this little thing, staff tell me I'm doing great. And I like social praise. And then they give me stickers. It can't be that. That's not why you wash your hands. Nobody's patting you on the back for your damn clean hands. Well, it's a whole different thing. The topography is identical and the function is exactly opposite. There's no function behind these things for many of the clients we work with. They're just strictly the steps and the sequences that we've taught them to memorize. That's not a contemporary behavior analysis, not even close. There is a big difference between performing a task and understanding a task. Performance of that task is not the same as comprehension. If you have things that are only contingency shaped, and we have a verbal client, don't you think that that verbal ability is going to get in their way? It's going to bias their contingency driven behavior from time to time. I mean, it does ours, does it not? And if your client doesn't have verbal skills yet, are you going to get them sometime? Are we going to teach them sometime? And I don't mean vocal necessarily, but I mean relating abilities. And if we can show these things at 18 months neurotypical, I think it's our obligation to make sure that we try to take our clients beyond 18 months of age in terms of cognitive capacity. Most of the things we do, the world that we live in is almost exclusively verbal. We imagine and we dream and we worry and we bump into our 5-minute break and we say, what should I do right now? Okay, well, I've got time. Maybe I'll get a little bit of a snack. I'll go run outside. I'm gonna go check my emails. You're not living in a contingency-driven world. It's an illusion. You stop being a product of your contingencies once you start speaking. And so how do we get somebody to understand the world around them? It can't be from task analyses. It cannot be from these chain tasks over and over and over again. We build this wonderful performance without meaning behind it. And those performances start to weaken when the contingencies are not there to support it anymore. And when things change, there's nothing there for us to do except teach the new skill to the changed environmental contingencies. That's not the way to build a robust life. That's not the ones that we're living. And it's tragic to think that's all we can do for the people that we work with. So this took me back to the lab. Oh, and we're going to talk about soap for way too long. So get ready. What the hell's going on? Why am I making such a big deal about hand washing? Well, let's even make a bigger deal about something smaller. Let's just take one element of that task, and that's the soap. This thing is a physical thing, right? As we encounter the world for the first time of soap, it's a rectangle looking thing that has nothing more to it than physical characteristics. It's all exclusively our interactions with it are not arbitrary. We describe the physical thing. We can pick it up, we can smell it, we can hold it. It's this thing that sits in the bathroom. And it's only an object. It's a stimulus object out there in the world, and there's a bunch of them, right? Like this thing here. See it? It's just a circle, isn't it? No, but I tell you that that circle is a piece of Velcro that held something very important together for me. And that Velcro failed and it broke the thing that I cared about. Now all of a sudden this Velcro circle has more meaning to it. If I was to ask you, do I like that Velcro circle or do I not like it? Would I trust it if I was going out into the world? Or do you think it would let me down? And that thing that's just a physical object starts to take on a variety of functional relations. It becomes more than just the thing, the literal thing. Now, the most common ways that we expand from physical stuff to having functional characteristics are things such as, like, when you see this rectangle in the bathroom, I say that's soap. And so all of a sudden the word, the vocalization gets attached to this object. And so now we have some correspondence between the thing and a vocalization. And maybe I could expand it farther and say, well, you know, these letters, SOAP, are the same as that thing. And if that thing is the same as the vocalization, I can make the inferences. And I can start building up these derived relations. I can train some, I get the emergence of others. Between the words, the text, the object, maybe an image that represents the object, maybe an image that's a little bit different than the object, but shares some formal properties. I could train into an abstract image, get derivations, equivalence classes. I could put it in comparative frames. Smell this soap. What smells better than that? What smells worse than that? You want a big bar of soap or a small bar of soap? Which one's bigger? Which one's smaller? All of a sudden, this thing called soap can start taking on multiple functions to it. And we can use those functions and transform them or transport them into other different places. What's even crazier than that is that this object can start taking on other properties as well that are beyond what we train it on and these more kind of simplistic references. Like the word is equal to the thing is equal to the thing, equal to the picture. But the truth is that that word is not the same. It's coordinated with the actual object, but it's not necessarily identical. I mean, if you had a bar of soap and the word soap in the bathroom with you and it was time to wash your hands, you wouldn't reach for the flashcard that said SOAP. And if you do, what a disaster we've got. Start washing your hands with the flashcard. It's like, well, they're the same, they're equal. No, they're not. If I say to you right now, imagine a bar of soap as it sits in your hands. I want you to smell it. You can smell it psychologically, can't you? You can feel it, a wet, slimy thing as it slips through your hands. Maybe it's dry and nice and cold, just as a new bar that you took out of the box. I want you to take a bite out of that soap. Let it crumble in your mouth. Can you taste it? And as you react psychologically to those words that I just said, ask yourself if your clients do, because I know every single one of you did. You can see it, you can smell it, you can taste that damn soap. And that added ability matters. Not just because it seems like it would be nice to be able to understand soapness at this level, but rather because that complexity of cognition not just on soap, on everything, is what we all take for granted that we got to make sure is part of our intervention with clients. I'm going to show you why it matters in a minute. And we can build even more on our little rectangle of soap. Because as I look at that thing in my bathroom, I realize it's part of the bath aisle at the store and probably need some shampoo, and I got to go back to the store. And I love lavender soap. And why do we have this cheap ass soap? I get some nice flowery scented soap, but that doesn't kill the germs. And all of a sudden you start getting into this rabbit hole, right? Soap keeps me clean, no germs. I don't want no germs. I don't want that coronavirus. I want to stay healthy and happy and living my life so I can go eat more pizzas at the grocery store. Soap is better than no soap. The lack of soap during my hand washing tasks creates a bunch of anxiety. What the hell it's going to do in a nasty bathroom? Now I got to wash my hands. I don't have any soap. And to be able to ask you and stretch this thing out in so many different wild ways. If you were a bar of soap, what kind would you want to be? You guys can answer that. I know you can. Yeah, be a little bit flexible, but you could do it. I want to be Dial. Dial's antibacterial. It's strong. Comes in a variety of flavors. That's me. I got a lot of different flavors, and well, maybe not flavors, but maybe flavors for personality, or kind of feelings. And sometimes I'm happy and sad. And if I was the happy Dial soap, it would be that blue one. If I was kind of the blah one, it'd be that yellow one that leaves the big marks on your sink. I mean, you can do it, right? God, that soap, that reminds me of when my mom washed my mouth out with soap because I was swearing at her and Miss Mom. I wonder if I'm a good mom. And there's a lot that can happen right there with any object out there in the world. And so at some point, we move from this being the totality of that item in that task analysis to all of these things. And why does this stuff matter? Well, let me show you. It's not just about soap. It's every object in every task that we try to build around life skills it's going to have formal physical characteristics. But as these physical characteristics start to take on more functions, just like this did, and just like the soap did, those things are more easily to be recalled. They start to give the task meaning. And the more functions we can add beyond the form of the stimulus just might increase ability to recall the task and give some understanding behind the performance. So if we think about this as maybe like we're adding more weight to the soap or any object out there, that weight might actually be able to improve recall. Let's take a look at this one. I told you we're going to talk about a lot about soap. All right. So let's just say we've got two different versions of soap. One that's just a physical object, and one that contains maybe some characteristics or psychological add-ons that we instruct. So if I know that this rectangle is there and it's nothing more than this rectangle in a bathroom, you know how easy it is for me to not kind of notice it and pay attention to it? You want to know why you're prompting use the damn soap so much? Because it has no meaning. Same reason why they're not touching the third tile on the backsplash of the bathroom. It has no freaking meaning to it. And so as we add in maybe one stimulus element here, like use soap to get clean, you say it, use soap to get clean. Or what do you use soap for? Clean. Just one single thing like that might tilt the scale just a little bit in favor of the item that had additional functionality to it. And we could add more here. What if I was to say that this thing here is the opposite of dirt? So I've got soap, and I've got a chicken wing, I've got a calculator, and I say, show me the opposite of dirt. Trial and error, we'll get it. Just adding some of that stuff on there. Soap makes me think of mom. Mom makes me feel sad. I'm guarantee it to you guys, when we break for lunch, you're not going to look at soap the same when you go wash your hands at lunchtime, because I've added so much onto it. And the scale tips even farther. You're going to attend to this thing in your environment much more than you did before training today. Just like the more that we do some of these remediation procedures, we may end up evolving a greater repertoire of completing these tasks. I add more and more onto this thing, and this thing gets greater weight, more functions. It's more easily recalled. Now, this was the idea that I had. I mean, hell, you can see I've spent a lot of time thinking about soap. A lot of slides talking about the slope of soap. Maybe that's what this is all about. It seemed to make sense. But that's a pretty robust, crazy theory. Does it actually work? Does this idea of adding, first of all, evaluating and adding relational complexity here, psychological weight, whatever you want to call it, doesn't actually matter? Well, those of you guys that know my history in terms of how Peak rolled out, was I want to make sure we had some data behind it. And the same thing started to happen with Life, because I know what I'm up against, and the challenge of putting something new out for you guys, and the weight of a hassle it becomes for you to take a training like this, to read a big 400-page book, and to just say that it's worth it because it's got to be better than what we've been doing. It's a heavy lift. And so while I might be a great entertainer here for you today, I also make sure that there's a little bit of data to support the things I'm talking about. And now with this book out, just wait till you see what starts showing up in terms of the evidence behind it, the rationale, and the impact that it can have. So the earliest Life study took place a few years ago, where we looked to see whether or not the content of what was in this module was even like similar to other things, as well as that if higher scores on this these Life modules would be predictive or correlated with other scores, higher scores on other indexes. And so again, I'm just going to show you a small amount of things that have been tinkered with. But these things I'm going to show you today are the kind of the explorations that led to Life, not the like proof that Life is as the book you see here is good. Those studies are evolving, but I want to show you kind of like why we're doing what we're doing here today. and tomorrow with respect to the importance of soap and the importance of the approach more general. So the first study was done looking at the content of this thing called the ICAP, or the Inventory for Client and Agency Planning, and its relationship to the material or the content areas that we were striving for to put into the Life program. Picked this because it's widely used. It's not behavior analytic. I don't want to get this kind of artificial correlation with a behavioral instrument, just because of the kind of assumptions as to like what that should look like. Oh, you probably got to have some tacting in there, some manding, and some listener responding. I want to have that. I mean, just that worldview would potentially bias. So we went outside of behavior analysis. And this thing has, I mean, for its strengths and weaknesses, it still has some pretty substantial psychometric characteristics and normative samples. It's easy to implement. It's well beyond the world of behavior analysis. So what we did was to, again, early on, this thing was called Peak Life. And so at this time, there's 184 skills, because that was what the other modules in Peak had, 184 skills in each of them. And there was 184 for vocational. Yeah, that's probably the one coming next, maybe. And then the one that you have in your hands or in the mail, or just, showing up surprisingly, even if you didn't order it, the functional assessment. And so what was asked was for caregivers to score utilizing the common peak scoring categories, or at least the numerical sequences 0, 2, 4, 8, and 10. The presence or the absence of each individual skill in that repertoire. So you can take our hand washing task. We would score the person a 10 on it if they could perform the task independently across multiple settings, materials, and people. It's kind of what we want, right? We want this dude to be able to wash his hands anywhere he needs to, and soap's not there, and figure it out, and towel's not there. If there's a automatic pumper and a air dryer versus a towel, or my pants, I gotta dry my pants, I can roll with hand washing. I think, like, if you had to score me on hand washing, Mark will independently wash his hands, I think I could hit a 10. I really do, with some effort, and no distractions. I could get the 10. Okay. And you can see how we move down from there. So an 8 would be indicated when you can do the task independently, but it's going to be under somewhat constrictive parameters. This is, I think, where we often, yell for success, like, hell yeah, we got it. But, change the materials, the people involved, the need to prompt the hand washing to begin with. Well, that'd be an 8. Good, but not great. It'd score 4 if you can perform the task with some prompting on certain steps, but other ones are independent, so that's cool. There's some independence there. We'd score 2 if hand washing task necessitated a damn prompt every single time, because the completion of one step did not serve sufficiently as a discriminant stimulus for the occasioning of the next response in the link or in the chain. And so I need to prompt every single step at some level, whether it be verbal or gestural, or maybe a combination of any of that stuff. And then a 0 would be scored if you could just be bringing out the fireworks and all the reinforcers, and then it's not happening no matter what. I'm not putting my hands in that water. I'm not doing anything related to this hand washing. Hell no. And so with that kind of scoring rubric, staff were charged with going through 184 of these items in this kind of beta version of the assessment, and then looking at and doing an ICAP on that same client, or looking in the files that were on record for that client to see what their score was. Now, again, so we're just kind of tinkering with this idea of, number one, I mean, does this rubric even make sense? And number two, is there some similarity between what I've cooked up with respect to this kind of content range for functional module as well as vocational module, and existing instrument that had nothing to do with behavior analysis that's supposed to be measuring life skills as well. So this study, we had 44 participants. Why is there no 6? That's a secret that will be revealed upon my death. The no 6 in PEAK or the scoring system, or maybe some other day, but not today. Worked with ABA of Illinois and some of their outreaches in Wisconsin to grab 44 clients. We had the range of IQ from 40 to 84. These are the people who did the assessment. And we ran some statistical analyses to see as to, was there a relationship between these tools, and as well as were there any complaints on the scoring besides where the hell's the 6. And here's those results. We see these correlations, and each of these dots is an individual client. We see the ICAP score, the known instrument on the x-axis, and then we see the 2 different PEAK module, Life module, beta content areas on the y-axis. And so why is the score over 184? Because remember, there's a score between 0 and 10 on each item. So a score of 10 on every item could yield 1,840 as your maximum score. So that's that significant beyond 0.01 level with a relatively comfortable R-squared value. So great. It seems as if maybe the content is appropriate for utilizing in life skills. But that's not all that needed to be done. The next task at hand was to see how specific interventions and critically, what I wanted to do was look to see how adding that additional complexity of functions, those relational elements to an object, may facilitate acquisition, and the lack thereof may hinder the acquisition of that step in the chain task. And so specifically, what we don't have in our literature is like, what do you do when one of those links is weak? I mean, I think we've all memorized the answer. Well, break it down into sublinks, maybe do some additional prompting, chain with, or forward chain task. Maybe if it's not working, backwards chain it. We all know the game. However, what if we did something different instead? What if we added additional functional relations to the missing link or to the weak link? Could my crazy scales on soap matter? Would they make a difference? So I went back into the lab even more and examined this process at a basic human operant level. Took 4 graduate students, put them in a room, gave them this contrived task that mirrored a task analysis that would be completed for things like hand washing, toothbrushing, ironing your clothes, or any of the life skills that we might be wanting to teach. And could we alter their performance based on the complexity of a step in the chain? So for those of you that don't know Mandarin, remembering these links in this chain task are going to be harder than memorizing the numbers. Those of you that know Mandarin, because there's more functions attached to this stimulus, are going to have no challenges across the stimuli. They're of the same complexity level. These may even be remembered better than the numbers, because the numbers are kind of just stimulus objects. But at some degree, that 8 is same age as my daughter, which is easier to recall than a number like 9, which is a year older than her, and 7 is the street I live on, 7th Avenue. And all of a sudden I could say, oh, well, it's daughter age 7th Avenue. And the functions can allow me to make these discriminations more effectively. And so in this base, and again, this is a basic research study. This was not designed to have any, immediate practical value, but it was rather to kind of dig into the core underworking mechanisms that surround a chain task. And so imagine this thing. And again, I'm going to show you a video in a minute, but you've got 4 keys that you have your fingers on the keyboard. And you're presented with this grid. And every trial, these numbers are going to be shuffled, right? So on trial 1, your grid looks like this. Now this row will always remain the same, okay? But the positioning of 8, 9, 5, and 7 is going to vary. And so on trial 1, with this configuration, my task is to press a key, right? So I'm going to engage in a behavioral topography for step 1. If I press D, that means I'm indicating that I believe 8 is the first step of this task. So you're trying to figure out what is the sequence that's correct to get to the bottom. After I press one of these keys, there's going to be a vocalization that takes place that says a computerized generation, computerized vocal that is emitted that says yes or no. And so I'm going to get feedback immediately as to like, yes, that was right, or no, it wasn't, in terms of trying to find out the 6-step sequence. Then I go to the next step. And I've got 4 items to guess. Well, do I think it's the 6, the 7, the 2, or the 1? So I'm going to press my corresponding key and get feedback. And then the next step I'm going to have is these 4 characters. And I have to pick which one and get feedback. And so over trial and error, I'm going to learn which sequence yields reinforcers and which one doesn't. But it's going to take some time, just like doing a new skill, like washing your hands or folding laundry or completing a recipe. And so on trial 1, I'm going to make errors. I've got a 1 out of 4 chance of guessing correctly, right? On trial 1, on every single one of these steps. And that feedback that I get should reduce my trial and error such that I'm starting to detect which ones are correct and incorrect over time. Are these characters more difficult to recall than these? And if I take these 2 rows of characters that are difficult and I add functions to one of them, 1 row, And the other row, I don't. Do I start to see a split in terms of recallability? If I add more weight to one of these characters? Is that the row that I recall better? If so, maybe adding weight to the soap isn't a bad idea after all. So here's a video clip of this, and it's hard to see the key presses. I'll just play this for a couple moments here so you can kind of get an idea of what the task looks like.
No. No. Yes. No. No. No.
Period of time separates
No.
the trials.
Yes. No. 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 Yes. No.
Okay, so you get the general idea of how this runs. Okay, so after exposure to this for a certain amount of time, certain amount of trials, getting hopefully some skill acquisition, right? I'm teaching the chain task here. It's 7-1. This character. And we're trying to get that sequence, right? Is there any differentiation of learning to the numbers, which seem to be more easily recalled, or these items that are much more difficult to discriminate? We don't have a history with them, us that don't speak Mandarin. But those that do would probably find these to be the quickest recalled. So we took, in our subject group, none of those folks knew Mandarin. And here's what they did. So let's just take a look at this subject and let me walk you through this, okay? Here's the number of trials that they're exposed. So each 6-step sequence is one trial. And during that 6-step sequence, we're going to individually plot their performance on each step. And so you can see here, and the colors aren't the greatest, but how they are performing on step 1, step 2, step 3, which is going to be that first row of Mandarin characters that that we're going to eventually test. So right now there's no difference between the red and the blue line in terms of, or there shouldn't be any difference in terms of relational weight. But you can see how, they're just separated out because after intervention, you're going to see some differentiation. And so then we have step 5, step 6. And again, we just have the kind of black lines here representing those numbers. And what you can see here as time goes on and exposure to this task, that the steps that were just the numbers became more, the accuracy rose considerably, right? These are cumulative number of correct responses on that step of the trial. But look what happened with these Mandarin characters. Not too good. So there is some differentiation between these types of stimuli in the chain task. Think about this. There is always going to be different levels of complexity to each step in your chain task, whether it be shoe tying, making an egg, putting your coffee pot together, whatever it is. These things are not all of equal complexity, but we treat them all as just equal steps. It's just step 1, step 2, and so on. And we use the same procedures. Just prompt it, it'll get better. We can see what differential reinforcement did here. it created weak links. And so we see that same pattern across all 4 of these subjects, where the manner and characters are responded to accurately at a lower level than the numbers. And you can see at the beginning, they're all equal because you don't know what number it is. It's through that history of differential reinforcement that this shows up. Okay, so now we got to do something. We're going to put some weight on top of one of those rows, the step 3 row, and we're going to leave step 4 alone. So we're going to train each character to an abstract word and an abstract word to a symbol. And then we're going to evaluate the ability to make the derivation from symbol to character. Now, this is done again in this very kind of sterile, abstract way to ensure that, you know, we've got tight internal validity, experimental control. It's the basic science stuff that makes clinicians nauseated, because it's like, where the hell is the use here? But just bear with me. I think we'll get back to the use in a second. So again, you can see on A to B training, we have a sample stimulus here that was in line 3. And then the 4 CVCs, or at least in English, nonsense words, fox, fug, assist, and cub. And so in the presence of one of these symbols, and again, depending on which one is presented as a sample, a certain correct response selection here is available, and then the other 3 are incorrect. And so we're going to train people on this A to B until they get to 3 trial blocks at least 90% accuracy in a row. Okay, so we run 10 trials of A to B, and we say, okay, did they hit this accuracy at 90%? Yes. Okay, then that's 1 trial block. And then we go to the next trial block, run 10 trials. Did they get 90% accuracy? Nope. Okay, so now the trial block criterion resets. So now we go again, trial block 3, did they get 90%? Yes. Okay, trial block 4, did they get it? Yes. Trial block 5, they get it? Yes. Okay, so now we're pretty confident that there's enough ability here that the subject knows this thing is equal to this. So we've added something, right? We directly trained it, but we added some relational complexity here. Then we train that word, that nonsense word, as a sample to one of these images. And these are just decks of clubs, diamonds, hearts, and spades. So we trained the novel word to one of these images. And same criteria, 10 trial block, you have to get 90% accuracy or better 3 times in a row. And once you're done with that, then we move on to testing C to A. Meaning now we take the the deck of cards symbol, and then the manner and characters, and without any feedback, without any reinforcement, any prompts, anything besides exposure, pick one. What happens? Can they make this inference? So we're training this to this and this to this, and we're hoping for the inference that way. And what we know in our literature is this is not an impossible feat. And what those of you that have run peak know that this is not an impossible feat. And so does adding some meaning here, even if it's just deck of card thing and a fake CVC, does it alter how well this is recalled when we run our chain task? So we had our task before. We show that these 2 rows when people were making errors and learning them at about the same rate. We take the test row and we build these relational frame. Essentially in this experiment, it's just a basic equivalence class. Now afterwards, will they do better on this row than on this row when it comes to trying to complete that chain task once again? And sure enough, they do. Red is the test row, are the ones that we added the relational complexity to. While blue is not. And so over trial and error, sure enough, this stuff starts to come together. But we accelerate the closure of the weak link and the chain by adding meaning to it, by taking that soap from an object and adding additional functions. These data suggest we cannot treat these links equally, that our remediation procedures need to be more robust than just additional prompts, and that maybe harnessing the power of derived relational responding can have a place in teaching life skills. Here's the data summarized, pretty clean. Taking those cumulative records and looking just strictly at the percentage of correct responding for all 4 subjects beforehand on the trained Chinese character and on the untrained Chinese character row, you see they're essentially the same. They're getting them right, guess what? 25% of the time. There's 4 options. Then after intervention, you see these individuals are getting the trained set. And again, this kind of is collapsed across time. So this isn't showing like the maximum percentage, but we're getting a greater effect of increased accurate responding after intervention on the trained class than on the untrained class. Now, this was replicated again. In this case, I'll show 2 kids with autism that we reduce the task level complexity based on their disability. And in this case, just again looked at those kind of time series, cumulative records, as well as response time. And here again, you see the differentiation between numbers and characters, with the colors being lower than the black lines, and then the trained step being higher than the untrained step for this individual. And we see an interesting pattern here where this person figured out those characters, before training even began on the relational repertoire, or adding the additional weight on it. So we unpack this a little bit more. And so what you see here is the response times. And so here's again, and just another way to analyze some of these data, and where you think, okay, well, we don't have differentiation with one of the 2. Well, let's look at it in another way. In addition to response accuracy, we looked at response time, and you can see here for the trained Chinese characters, the response time, and these are both kids aggregated together in terms of their response times on each trial block, reduces for before and after on the trained Chinese characters, and with significance. And we see much greater variation in non-significant data on the untrained Chinese character. So lots, a few different things here that sniff at the value of adding more weight to your soap. So the summary here that leads us to why this content of life needs to be different, why the approach needs to be different, is that we got to make sure that we are are giving you guys in the community a content that matches relevant skill domains and well-established instruments that we can use contingencies to teach chain tasks, that the added challenges that come about from weak links in the skill can be reduced through adding more weight to these unknown elements. And when we expand, not just remediate, but we can expand the relational complexity of any task using these same procedures, that we're going to get more adaptive functioning at a global level over time in the repertoire of the individuals that we serve. So this leads us to our second word of the day. And that second word of the day is canopy. If you're in the sun, you may need a canopy to protect you with some shade. However, if it's windy, your canopy may blow away. So canopy is second word of the day.